Because of how expansive or detailed they are, some video games feel as though they feature living worlds. Even though you play a major role in the stories of these worlds, sometimes they don't totally revolve around you. Even an episodic companion has the capability of changing the course of an entire game, or in these cases, the game's follow-up. I'm Sai for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video game characters you didn't realise majorly affected sequels. Number 10. Garl Deathhand, Fallout. Those who have played both Fallout 1 and 2 realise how important Tandy is to the Fallout universe as a whole. Along with her father, she is the founder of the New California Republic and one of its first elected presidents. The faction plays an important role in all Fallout games taking place on the west coast of the US and gets mentioned in almost every other title. However, as much as Tandy's involvement in the creation of the NCR is obvious, her decision to unite the people of the wasteland under its banner wouldn't have been made if it weren't for the choices made by the ruthless raider who kidnapped her, Garl Deathhand. Yes, ironically, it is Tandy's enemy who motivates her to make the change. Garl's gang was the chief reason why the settlements of Fallout 1 couldn't unite. When Garl decides to kidnap Tandy, he effectively brings the wrath of the Vault Dweller upon his people and causes the destruction of the major threat looming over Sandy Shores. Additionally, kidnapping Tandy probably opened her eyes to the dangers awaiting her settlements and motivated her to stay with them instead of running away on an adventure like she always wanted. Number 9. Killer Croc, ARKHAM Asylum. Although the ARKHAM games do a lot to highlight all of Batman's iconic villains, not every one of them gets the same amount of screen time. Killer Croc makes only minor appearances in the games, and yet some of these brief cameos are probably the most important scenes for the entire storyline of Arkham Knight. To put it briefly, Killer Croc is the reason why Scarecrow becomes the threat he is in Arkham Knight. In the first game, Scarecrow's plot to defeat Batman is thwarted by Croc, who unexpectedly mauls Scarecrow when he and Batman enter his lair. At that point, most assumed that the Scarecrow was dead. However, he managed to survive his encounter with Killer Croc, though it left him severely disfigured. The scars and trauma left by the events became the sole reason for Scarecrow to want to enact his revenge on Batman. The games leading up to Arkham Knight revealed that, although it was Croc who gave Scarecrow the scars, the master villain blamed Batman for the events and decided to amass an army and huge supplies of neurotoxins to make the hero suffer. And all of this because one green guy got really hungry. Number 8. Evelyn Miller, Red Dead Redemption. Both Red Dead Redemption games are full of encounters with random strangers who help build the atmosphere of the Wild West and also provide the player with something to do in between the main missions. However, one particular stranger from Red Dead 2 is actually far more relevant to the main plot of the series than you might guess at first glance. Evelyn Miller is a troubled writer who feels dissatisfied with his writings and wishes to spend the rest of his days in the wilderness. Eventually, a spark of inspiration causes him to lock himself up in his cabin and then write himself to a literal death. This may not seem important to the game's story, but as it turns out, Miller is Dutch's favourite writer and a big inspiration behind his entire persona as a revolutionary leader. Moreover, when the player visits Miller during his last moments, he will tell them that he can't fight his nature the same way Dutch does in Red Dead Redemption. This means that Miller is one of the major reasons why Dutch becomes disillusioned with his ideals, goes crazy, dismantles the gang, and eventually turns into the broken man we know from the first game. Number 7. CHEN STORMSTOUT, World of Warcraft. CHEN STORMSTOUT is an NPC the player can encounter in the Mists of Pandaria expansion, where he appears in a handful of quests. However, prior to this, Chen played a far more important role in the World of Warcraft universe, although most of the game's players may not be aware of it. You see, Chen used to be a companion in Warcraft 3, which the story of World of Warcraft follows directly. If you haven't played the games, you wouldn't know that this random panda man is partially responsible for the founding of Durotar and the Horde in general. Chen helped Thrall defend Durotar from human attacks and helped his people settle there. However, Chen's importance to the story doesn't end here. Warcraft 3 also chronicled the events of the Third War with the Burning Legion. Here, Chen is shown as a war hero who defended the world from armies of the undead alongside the King of the Dwarves. What this means is that CHEN STORMSTOUT has been an important figure in some of the key moments of World of Warcraft's expansions as well. Chen's character has had many impacts on his world, even though all he leaves behind are empty kegs. Number 6. Pagan Min, Far Cry. Pagan Min was a huge part of his own Far Cry game, but as it turns out, the legacy of his psychotically charismatic character extends even beyond the events of Far Cry 4. One of the recent DLCs for Far Cry 6 reveals that Pagan's country might have been involved in the plot and one of the endings of Far Cry 5. The DLC titled Control allows you to play as Pagan exploring his psyche. Towards the end of the campaign, the player can access a secret tape Pagan left for AJ in Far Cry 4, in which he tells him about a stash of nuclear weapons he's been storing at CROC and has them aimed at America, just in case the CIA's involvement in his country gets out of hand. To be more specific, the nukes were aimed at a region in Montana, the same state where the events of Far Cry 5 take place. If the player's choices lead to an ending where Joseph Seed gets his wish, Pagan's nukes go off and Hope County goes up in flames. Moreover, this ending is likely canonical for Ubisoft's post-apocalyptic spin-off Far Cry New Dawn, meaning that Pagan changed the course of history. Number 5. FERON, Mass Effect 2. FERON doesn't really get much screen time in Mass Effect, which is a shame because he is both a fascinating character and a huge reason why Mass Effect 2 could even happen. Those who have played through the Lair of the Shadow Broker know of FERON's involvement in retrieving Shepard's body after the commander was sucked out into space. However, official comics released by BioWare called Mass Effect Redemption explore more detail about the events that led up to Shepard's recovery and show how much FERON and Liara had to accomplish to get the protagonist of the games back for the sequel. Despite only working as an information broker, FERON eventually teams up with Liara and betrays his own organisation to help her retrieve Shepard's body for Cerberus. The comics delve into how FERON's cunning and knowledge of the criminal world helped Liara on her mission time and time again. His change of heart throughout their adventures together is largely responsible for Shepard not becoming a zombie under Reaper's command, which would have ended the events of Mass Effect 1 on a rather grim note. Number 4. FIONA, Dragon Age Inquisition. Those who have played Dragon Age Inquisition will mostly know FIONA as the representative of the mage side of the Mage-Templar War in the game, but the truth is she's actually a far more prominent character, and her actions prior to Dragon Age Inquisition were a major reason for the entire storyline of the game. FIONA is actually the main character of 2 novels that take place before the events of the title. She's shown to be an incredibly competent mage who eventually joins the Order of the Grey Wardens, but due to losing her fellow members' graces, she is eventually put back in the Circle of Magi. Her small taste of freedom made her despise her gilded cage, and she began campaigning for the release of mages, eventually succeeded in outvoting the Templars. What this means for Dragon Age Inquisition is that FIONA isn't just a part of the conflict, she's the one who started it. Without her, there would be no need to organise peace talks between mages and Templars, their most powerful leaders wouldn't get blown up, and the game's world wouldn't need to call the Inquisition to end their conflict and save the world. Number 3. Karen Daniels, Grand Theft Auto 5. Karen Daniels, or better known by her alias Michelle, plays an important role in the storyline of Grand Theft Auto 4, where she acts as an undetected agent trying to incriminate Nico Bellic and get him to work for the United Liberty Paper. What might have slipped past a lot of players' radars is that Karen has actually made an appearance in Grand Theft Auto 5 as well, and surprisingly enough, her brief cameo is actually a big reason behind Michael, Trevor and Franklin joining forces together. Karen appears in the Mission 3's company, where she seems to be in charge of interrogating Mr. K, a man Franklin, Trevor and Michael are all hired to kidnap to save the reputation of Steve Haynes and Dave Norton. The 2 FIB agents decide to bring all of the main characters together for this mission, as they believe only their collective skills can make the extraction possible. If Karen and her supervisor hadn't been relocated to Los Santos and put in charge of Mr. K's investigation, Michael would most likely continue to avoid Trevor, and Trevor and Franklin would never have met. It was her involvement that pushed the narrative forward. Number 2. Reginald Birch, Assassin's Creed. Reginald Birch is a character Haytham Kenway meets at the beginning of Assassin's Creed 3. Judging by their brief and only conversation in the game, you wouldn't assume much of Reginald, but as it turns out, his character serves as a major link between the events of Assassin's Creed 3 and 4. Haytham's database reveals that Reginald Birch is actually the main reason why Haytham joined the Templar Order, despite being the child of one of the most prolific assassins in the New World. In 1735, Birch ordered a group of mercenaries to attack the Kenway family household after learning about Edward Kenway's journals from his time in the Caribbean. The attack was a success, and not only did Birch manage to kill Edward in his own house, he also used the attack to manipulate the mind of the then young Haytham and convince him to join his order. Birch became a mentor figure for Haytham and turned him into a Templar loyalist, with tales of chivalry and knights protecting the innocent. If it wasn't for him, perhaps we would have seen Haytham join forces with Connor in the 3rd game, or even become a pirate in his father's crew. Number 1. Doug Ratman, Portal 2. The elusive Ratman has always been a huge mystery in the Portal games. He's the only other survivor of GLaDOS' activation, along with Chell, but the only evidence the player can find of his existence are his temporary camps left throughout the lab complex. This all changed when Valve released a comic titled Portal 2 Lab Rat, shedding some light on who Ratman truly is and showing just how important his character is to the story of the sequel. Finally appearing with his actual name, Doug Ratman is shown to be a scientist who became increasingly more paranoid after after GLaDOS killed all of the people in Aperture Science. He's managed to stay off her radar by sticking to the back walls of the facility, but he kept observing what was happening with Chell, as he believed she was the only one who could defeat GLaDOS and earn her freedom. When Chell goes to hibernate at the end of the first game, it turns out the power in the facility is shutting down, and she will eventually die in the cryo chamber. Doug saves her by putting her cryo chamber into the reverse grid, effectively setting off the events of Portal 2. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Which of these didn't you know about? And of course, let us know of any others that we might have missed. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I've been Cy for WhatCulture, and have a good week.